Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you all here to Go Art on behalf of the Holland Land Office. I know it's confusing. I'm throwing a lot of locations at you at once. The museum is undergoing some renovations at the moment, so that's why we are kind of becoming the orphans about town and finding other places to go. So thank you to Go Art for allowing us to use their space for tonight and future dates. So I want to welcome you all to this edition of the Guest Speaker Series. It is something that we try to do 2 to 3 times a month with different guest speakers from around this area, sometimes out of state. So it's a really fun program. I want to thank Tompkins Community Bank for their support of it this year, as well as Go Art as we received a grant for it through the Regrant Program. So this project is made possible with funds from the Statewide Regrant Program of the New York State Council of the Arts to support, with the support of the Office of the Governor and New York State Legislature administered by Go Art. Go Art acknowledges that the land on which this project takes place is the ancestral territory of the Seneca Nation, one of the 6 nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Go Art recognizes the historical and ongoing presence of indigenous peoples in Western New York and honors their enduring relationship to this land. And now on to our presentation for tonight. Tonight you will have the opportunity to hear from Joseph Ellicott. The name Ellicott should be well known 200 years after he spent most of his life in Western New York, but there is so much we don't know about him as well. I must warn you that Mr. Ellicott has been in a dark mood of late, so please be quiet as he enters. Mr. Ellicott, you have some guests.
It has been said that man dies twice. First time when he physically dies, and the next time when the last person says his name. You are here to hear my story so you can say my name. Joseph Ellicott. It's 1824. They're ready to ship me down the canal I brought to Western New York, to Bloomingdale Asylum. I don't have much time left. And my time is always organized in parallels and perpendiculars. I need to start at the beginning to tell my story correctly. So I'm starting at 1760 when I was born in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, to a Quaker family. I was the middle of 9 children. There was Andrew, Sarah, David, Ann, myself, Mary, Letitia, and the twins, Benjamin and Rachel. When I was about 10, my parents decided they were going to move to Maryland. My father was very handy. His whole family had been handy. His ancestors were the clockmakers for the King of England. If you have an Ellicott clock, you have a very special clock. He wanted to go to Maryland because he thought he could build a mill to restore the land there and raise grain by using plaster of Paris as a fertilizer. The land had been depleted by raising tobacco for many years. When he moved, several of his brothers and their families went as well, and they also took the 5 orphaned Evans children with us. We were a big crowd going to Maryland. And when I was in Maryland, I finished my schooling, and I thought I could become a teacher. Learning came easy to me. I love learning. That wasn't the case for all the students that I had. Many of them had to stay home and work on the farms. They could only come on occasional days. So after a year of that, I realized that's not going to work for me. My oldest brother, Andrew, was a surveyor. He was a surveyor, and they were working on surveying the line between Maryland and Pennsylvania. They'd gotten this special thing. William Penn had ordered from England. It was called a transit. The first transit in the United States. And Misters Mason and Dixon, who had come from England, were going to use this. A transit is basically a telescope that can do mathematical principles. And they had it. And my brother got to use it when they settled that line. And he said, why don't I come with him because he'd been given the job of finding the western boundary for Pennsylvania. You see, Pennsylvania and New York were part of Massachusetts, and basically they went from sea to sea. There was no western boundary. They had to establish one. So I went with my brother Andrew. We established the western boundary of Pennsylvania. That is called the Ellicott line, after my brother, not me. But I realized that in doing that job, this is something I was good at. So I did some smaller jobs, and then the two of us and a couple others had the job to do the same thing for New York State. A king in England had decreed some time ago the western boundary of New York State would have to be based on the western end of Lake Ontario. And if we look at this map, we were going to have to cross the Niagara River, go through a foreign country, Canada, which was ruled by Great Britain, and find the western end of Lake Ontario and establish the line of longitude, then track that back. So when we crossed the Niagara River, we were the first people to do a topographical study of the falls and the rapids. We were working our way through Canada. We were approached by British soldiers. They said, "Where is your form that gives you permission to do what you say you're doing?" We didn't have anything like that. They ordered us to turn around and go back. We hadn't gone too far when one of the riders caught up to us and said, "We found the necessary papers, you may go ahead." So with that, we continued through Canada to find the western end of Lake Ontario. We established the line of longitude. We had to go back through Canada. We had to cross the Niagara River again. Now we had to start down along the southern boundary, or the southern border edge of Lake Erie to find that matching line of longitude. And what was at stake? A rather large village by the name of Erie, Pennsylvania. We wondered, would it be part of New York State or part of Pennsylvania? It's part of Pennsylvania. The western end of New York State is not a long boundary. It's 18 miles, 50 chains, and 91 links. This is a surveyor's chain. This is a link. There are 100 links in the chain. It's 66 feet long. If you lay this out 80 times in a row, you have a mile. That's how surveying was done. That, and with a compass. And if you're fortunate, you could have the transit. In laying out the western boundary of New York State, 18 miles, you're going to do some math as though you're my students now. If there's 80 chains in a mile, I'll make it easy on you. I'll round it to 20. What's 20 times 80? 1,600. I need you to lay this chain out 1,600 times in a row perfectly straight using a compass. We're going to establish the boundary. And we did that. When I'd finished that, George Washington's Secretary of War, Timothy Pickering, asked if I would go to Georgia to settle a boundary dispute with the native Indians there. So I did. Now you must understand, travel, you can walk 25 miles a day or ride a horse about the same distance. Wagons can go maybe 10 miles a day. I had to go about 800 miles. I was able to do some of it by sailing down the coast and coming in and finding what I needed to do. I nearly died of yellow fever when I was doing this job. I recovered, and about that time, my brother, Andrew, was busy on a new job, and he asked me to join him. You see, our country had a capital. It was Philadelphia. Our country in the beginning was just this little corner, and now it was getting long, with states being added. So they decided to build a capital more in the center So they took some land from Virginia and Maryland, and they called it the District of Columbia. And they were laying out a brand new city to be called Washington, D.C. To do the job, of course, they brought a person over from Europe, because if you're from Europe, you're smarter than the people from our United States, they said. His name was Pierre L'Enfant. Pierre L'Enfant had worked on laying out Paris. In Paris, they have a pretty unique system. It's not all parallels and perpendiculars. They have streets that go out like the spokes of a wheel. When he came and worked in Washington, D.C. with my brother Andrew, they laid out Washington, D.C. like the spokes of a wheel. That's quite radical in a world of parallels and perpendiculars. And I have to jump to 1804, and this doesn't make me feel good when I do that, but I'm jumping because in 1804, I laid out New Amsterdam. Can you see the radiating spokes, the streets? New Amsterdam became Buffalo Creek and became Buffalo. I took that idea from Pierre L'Enfant when I got to lay out New Amsterdam. But I need to tell my story in sequence, so I have to go back to finishing up in Washington, D.C. Pierre L'Enfant had gotten angry at the people who were his superiors, and he went back to Europe. My brother Andrew is the surveyor of record for Washington, D.C. When we finished that, I was approached by the Holland banking houses. The money of the world existed in Holland. There were primarily 4 banking houses to start. They were buying up huge amounts of the United States because they had funded the American Revolution. They had funded the French Revolution. They were now buying up acres, millions and millions of acres, to make money. They had a team working in western Pennsylvania, but not to their satisfaction, and I was building a reputation for the good job that I could do. I was very exact. I was very demanding. I didn't get along well with people, but that didn't bother me. As long as you did it perfectly, you can work for me. And if not, I will correct you. So they asked if I would go into western Pennsylvania and check it out. Is it worth purchasing and developing? A surveyor just doesn't measure. A surveyor has to find where are the trees and what kinds are they. He has to decide where could you build a mill? Can you even farm the land? Can you find salt deposits? After going through western Pennsylvania, I took the time and wrote a 58-page report for them. I said, don't buy it. It's not worth developing. The land isn't good enough to do what you want to do. So they decided they'd put their focus on western New York, because America's richest man, Robert Morris, was in a monetary trouble. He owned millions and millions of acres of this new country, and he was in financial straits. So he wanted to sell off the 3.3 million acres. It looks like this end of western New York, basically from the Genesee River going west. And he wanted to sell that. There's a problem. He wasn't the only owner. The Senecas laid claim to it as well. So to resolve that, they decided to have a gathering at Haudenosaunee in 1797. There were probably 1,000 Senecas led by Red Jacket, Corn Planter, Farmer's Brother, many others. Jeremy Wadsworth represented the United States. Morris sent his son. I was there, not as anything except a surveyor. If the job got done, a treaty was signed, I would go to work. But I was there. So they negotiated for 3 days. The chiefs, working with Morris and Wadsworth. At that point, after 3 days, there was 200,000 acres would be given to the Senecas, $100,000 in stock to the First Bank of the United States. And it reached a point where the chiefs were saying no. In fact, Red Jacket decided to cover the fire, which meant the negotiations were over. Morris couldn't have that happen, so he called upon the warriors and the women of the Seneca, and he showed them 60 cows. 60 cows and some bribes to the chiefs, and the agreement was done. The Treaty of Big Tree, 1797, was done. I had a job. My job was to go around Western New York, 3.3 million acres, and organize it. I went to Philadelphia for that winter, and I treated this whole thing as though I was an army general laying out something, a big thing I had to do. And I wrote a lot in my journal. Journal writing is so important. Here is some of what I needed if I was going to do this job. I would need 130 men, surveyors, draftsmen, cooks, axemen, camp keepers. I purchased food by the barrel, 270 barrels of flour, 100 barrels of pork, 15 barrels of beef. In the pork, I was very demanding. Here's what I wrote about the pork. The pork shall be of merchantable quality, well put up and salted in good, clean, tight, substantial barrels, containing 208 weight each. There shall not be in each barrel more than 3 shoulders without legs and 2 heads without ears and snouts. Other equipment I would need: 5 boats, 2 ox teams, 35 pack horses, 100 pair of horseshoes, 200 blankets, 30 tents, 70 axes, 105 pairs of shoes. And to write this down, 6 large folio books, 2 grosses of black lead pencils, 1,000 Dutch quills, and a gross of binding. The total cost for this, it took 3 years to complete, was $70,921.69. There were many issues. Men were going to get drunk. Men would get hurt. Animals would get hurt. We could work around that. One of the things that bothered me most was the units of measure. We were a new country. People coming from their country brought their unit of measure. Their unit of measure was often something like a ruler based on a foot of their ruler. They weren't all the same. That doesn't work for me. I need exactness. I took the rulers that we had, I standardized and created a 12-inch ruler. Every team went out with a brass 12-inch ruler. If you're working for me, you're going to be exact. That's how I do it. So what did we do? We had to create a line from Pennsylvania to Lake Ontario. I needed a transit line. My younger brother Benjamin, another handy Ellicott, built another transit. So we could start at the Pennsylvania border and start aiming for Lake Ontario. But there are trees in the way, so why do we have axemen chop the trees down? I need a path cleared 66 feet wide, which is the length of a chain. I need it cleared from here to Lake Ontario. A math problem again. It's almost 80 miles. What's 80 times 80? 6,400 times. I need this chain put down perfectly straight. I demand exactness. And you might wonder, what do you do when you're going up a hill when you're surveying? Because if you go up the hill, you're losing distance. Imagine a hill being a series of steps. So if I had the chain, I could hang a plumb from the end and take the chain until it hit the hill and write down how many links was that. And go to that point and do it again and again and again and again and again. And when I get that number, divide it by 80. That will tell me how many chains it took to go up. And the same going down, because it has to be exact. You can't add or lose ground by bad measuring. So we did that. We crossed swamps, we crossed ponds, we crossed small lakes, we crossed rivers, creeks. For 2 years, we had to do this all the way around. Now I have a plan. My plan in laying this out in this other map, this is a good one to show you how I would do this. Imagine I superimposed a grid on all of Western New York. Going across every 6 miles, I'd have a range. Range 1, range 2, range 3, range 4, range 5, etc. Going up every 6 miles, I'd have a township. Township 1, township 2, township 3, etc. On that transit line, when you pull in a boulder at the intersection where the first mile ends, I want you to chisel in the range and township number. For example, 5-1. Go another mile. Boulder, 5-2. Another mile. Boulder, 5-3. Because we're going to have to come back and work off of those to lay out the land. We had a big marker at the beginning at Pennsylvania, and when we really reached Lake Ontario, we had another marker to indicate that we were done. It was not an easy job. It took us nearly 2 years to do that. We worked almost year-round. Illness, it wasn't easy. Life outside, it wasn't easy. But I demanded exactness. I had a second group working on the western bound or the eastern boundary at the Phelps-Gorham line, and I would go back and forth between the two lines, making sure everything was happening the way it should, till it was done. Then in 1800, they were starting to change the leadership. Theophilus Cazenove was head of the Holland Land Company, which is what the Dutch banking houses came to be known as. And there were 6 of them at that time. He was in Philadelphia. He was a big party man. He would invite people in. He was a rather obese man. And he didn't like being referred to as that, but he was. But he was there to get people to buy land, to give them food, to give them drink. But around 1800, 1801, Paolo Busti, Paul Busti, took over. I worked 25 years for the Holland Land Company. He came to visit twice from Philadelphia. It's an arduous trip. To get from Philadelphia to Western New York, you could take a boat to Albany. You could take a stagecoach to Canandaigua. Then you got on horses and hoped to follow trails and hoped to find Western New York. It wasn't easy. Once the surveying was done, now they needed to sell the land. So they put out applications for this job called the resident agent. I was given the job because I knew the land. My work ethic was spotless. I demanded excellence. I was very frugal with money, and they knew I could do the job. So now my job was to sell the land. Now the Dutch banking houses, they were hoping to have speculators come in and buy hundreds of thousands of acres. That wasn't my plan. You have to understand, Western New York was a wilderness. In about 1800, there were only 52 non-native people in all of Western New York. My thought was, let's bring the veterans from previous wars into the wilderness and give them land, promise them land, if they can give a deposit. And if they can't make a deposit, can you chop down some trees to help make a road? Can you give me salt? I have a plan. My plan was every 10 miles, I would give land for an inn and a blacksmith shop. That's how far a wagon could travel in a day. That was part of my plan. My first office was in an inn run by Asa Ransom. I was on the wrong side of the property. I was on the western boundary and people were coming from the east. So I decided that I should go to form a better place in Batavia. Now Batavia means land of good earth. It's from Holland, it's a term. So I decided to set up my office there. And I have to read for you from my journals a description of the various lands at that time. In 1802, I moved my office to Batavia. There were 56 people. 1803, the population was up to 230. By 1810, village of Batavia, that's what people were changing the name from Batavia, over 1,100 inhabitants, while the town of Batavia, over 3,660 people. In 1820, Batavia outnumbered the population of Rochester, but was less than Canandaigua. Now Rochester, you have to understand, was not a prime spot. In 1809, one of our state legislators had made a trip there, and he had written, "It's a God-forsaken place, inhabited by muskrats, visited only by straggling trappers, through which man nor beast could gallop without fear of starvation and illness." But Canandaigua, 120 handsome houses, most of them wood and painted white. In the center square were an attractive brick courthouse, a jail, and an elegant academy. 6 stores, 6 taverns, 2 tanning yards, 2 distilleries, 6 doctors, and 6 lawyers. There's a very good reason why Canandaigua was that good. If you looked again at this map, all of Western New York was part of one county called Ontario. The county seat, Canandaigua. I found that in order for me to go to Canandaigua, it's a 2-day trip there, 2 days back, was taking too much time away from what I needed to do. I had a plan. My plan was to break off this land and make it Genesee County, which I did. I had another plan. Let's break it into more parts. Chautauqua, Allegheny, Cattaraugus, Niagara, and then Erie. Now there was a reason I did this. In order to get better representation in Albany, I needed more representation. If we had Genesee, we could only send a certain number of people. But now if we had Chautauqua, we could send them, and Allegheny and them, Cattaraugus and them, Niagara, Erie. You must understand, around this time in Maryland, there's a signer of the Declaration of Independence by the name of Elbridge Gerry, or Jerry, that some people pronounce. He changed boundary lines so he could get reelected. Gerrymandering, or gerrymandering. I came up with a plan, and it was never called Ellicott-mandering. I think it was pretty brilliant on my part to make that work. One of the things that we were finding out, to sell more land, we had to have a place for the farmers to get their crops. It could take weeks to get crops to Albany because there were no roads. So there was some initial talk about having a canal. And the first idea of the canal was to go from Albany up through Oswego to Lake Ontario, sail across Lake Ontario, come in Lewiston. There was a problem, and it really surfaced in 1812 when Great Britain went to war with the United States, because Lake Ontario was controlled by the British. That would never work. It took several years before that was settled. And if you remember, one of the things I did, I laid out New Amsterdam. The British burnt the houses in Buffalo. People started to rebuild them in the middle of my streets. In 1816, I went back and I relaid out those streets. I originally wanted my house right where all the streets went out. I thought, what a great spot. But the powers that be said, no, you have to have your streets this and such and such. That's when I decided I would make my permanent residence in Batavia. That's where I built my 25-room house, which included my offices. It also included a clock my father had made, 8 foot tall, grandfather clock, 24 different sounds. The Ellicotts were handy men. When the war was finally over, the idea of a canal could now be pushed a little farther. There was a big issue. My boss, Bustai, did not want to do it. Many of the representatives in Albany did not want to do it. I remembered what worked at the Treaty of Big Tree, bribery. So I told Mr. Bustai, I've got an idea. Let's give the state 100,000 acres of land at the Pennsylvania border. Just give it to them. This might sway them a bit. Now, Mr. Bustai, in his writings to me, he wrote this about my idea. The magnitude of the undertaking of the canal is so great that it is impossible for me to believe that it ever be perfected. Give the state 100,000 acres of land along the Pennsylvania border? I finally convinced him to do it. Our governor at that time was DeWitt Clinton. On April 15th in 1817, the state finally approved. The following day, Clinton wrote this to me. I cannot leave this place without congratulating you upon the success of the canal bill. It has become law by large majorities in both houses and after much opposition. In 1817, he allowed me to be one of the canal commissioners, which would plan where the canal was going. There were several of us doing this job. I knew the land. My goal would have been to have it come through Batavia. I had my nephew sit at the mouth of the Tonawanda Creek and see how the water flow was. But there wasn't enough water to fill a canal. So we had to go with a plan that took it below the escarpment. And when they were getting along towards the end of it, they said, we need to know where this is going to end. The biggest village at the time was Black Rock, right along the Niagara. Peter Porter was big there. He hoped it would end there. It didn't. The other ending point would be to take it to the mouth of Lake Erie, which is where it went to. In 1819, I resigned from that commission. And it was around this time, a lot of people were complaining about me, Joseph Ellicott. They were calling me an alien. Alien being a person from another country. I'm a Quaker from Pennsylvania. But I was taking their money and sending it to Holland. They didn't like that. They said my personality was changing. My behavior was not normal. It was getting erratic. I had fits of blackness of mind. Somebody had written The Black Dog Bites Joseph Ellicott. In 1821, Paul Bustye made his second trip to Western New York to demand that I resign. I had worked 25 years for the Holland Land Office. I never married. That was my job. I took it very seriously. But he made me resign. That was 3 years ago now. I've tried visiting my relatives. I tried to buy up the unsold land and sell it to the people. I couldn't get enough financial support to buy all the land. That didn't work. And here we are, it's 1824. And even my family now says I must be shipped down the canal. The canal is not officially open. It's functional. I brought this canal to Western New York. But I need to go to Bloomingdale Asylum. They say I need help. That's why I've invited you here, to hear my name. So you can say the name Joseph Ellicott. Because in a couple of days, I will be gone from here. So you need to know my name. Joseph Ellicott. And I need to go pack.
It was written that, quote, life became a twisted world of tormented thoughts, rolling confusion, and deep moroseness. It was at the asylum on August 19, 1826, 200 years ago today, that Ellicott took his own life by hanging himself at the age of 66. He was originally buried in New York City, but later reinterred in a family plot in his beloved Acadia. Ellicott would be pleased to know that his name lives on in every corner of Western New York, in naming creeks, towns, buildings, and roads. Mr. Ellicott has left the building, but Dennis Upton will return to answer any questions that you have.
You just leave it, Ryan. Yeah, this is a big day because this is the date that Ellicott actually ended his life 200 years ago today. And Ryan contacted me and he said, would you come and speak on that date? And I said, I'd consider it a privilege. It's quite a trip, isn't it? I mean, think of the engineering feat of measuring that transit line. I've had surveyors in my audiences. They said they've gone out with GPSs and found those marker stones. They could be 6, 7 miles away from the beginning, and they're off by 50 feet. If you get off down here, by the time you go 7 miles, you're way off. But he really demanded some excellence on that. Now, he created a transit line. Does that word transit sound familiar? Yeah. The transit line started in Pennsylvania. The surveyors actually went into the woods and dug and dug and dug until they found that stone, and now it's in Allegheny State Park Museum.
Yes, it is.
The other end is up in Newfane, Olcott. They dug it up in '85, and they have it in a museum up there too. And I go up in the spring and I talk by the stone. It's in a barn. I don't think it's displayed the way it should for the importance of what it is. Because people walk into this barn and there's a big stone, but there's an old truck. People go to the old truck. until I stand there looking like this by the stone and say, I can tell you a story. And they listen to it. Yes, ma'am.
Was the Ellicott Trail named for him?
I'm sure it was. There were so many things named Ellicott in Western New York. And think of how many town line roads there are.
Oh my God.
But every 6 miles was a new township.
Yeah.
You know, there are Ellicott roads all over Western New York. First time I came to visit Ryan, they have a big banner in front of the museum, said Ellicott. And my last name's Upton. Guess what the other banner is? Upton. I thought he was being very gracious.
I didn't believe it at first.
Yeah. Emory Upton is no relation to me, unfortunately. But Ryan's been a wealth of information for me. If you ever hear him do his talk, The Ghosts of Western New York, he talks about what is there in Western New York that's based on the naming. One of the things is the Evans family. We have a town on Lake Erie, Evans. It was probably the third or fourth presentation I had done when somebody said, oh, then probably the town of Holland. And that was, I hadn't even thought of that one. It's like, boom, okay. When I was a kid, I grew up on Town Line Road in Wilson. In our front yard was a great big stone. My mom always said, that's a Holland Land Company marker. But for us kids, it was just one of the bases when we were playing. So a couple of years ago, I was traveling out that way and I stopped to see it again. And the owner of the house came out and I noticed that the stone isn't where it used to be. It was over a couple of feet and back a few. So I said, what happened to the stone? He said, a car came along, hit the ditch, came out of the ditch, hit the stone, moved the stone. Then he said, my plan is to pull that stone up by the front porch. So I told him a story. I went back this year, the stone's up by the front porch. Yeah, I guess they can't use that for surveying anymore. My oldest brother recalls, though, surveyors using that stone when they were basing what they were doing, because when you do surveying, you have to go to previous markers that have been used to establish the lines you have. So they would use that particular line. I don't know what they do now, but they've got GPS to make that all a little bit different. I got started doing this Ellicott about 5 or 6 years ago at the Hull House. Have you ever been to the Hull House? Great place to go. That's like I tell everybody, come see the Holland Land Office Museum. Incredible place to go. But the Hull House was doing like a candlelight tour of individuals in Western New York history. So doing a 7-minute presentation wasn't enough for me. I'm a retired teacher and I do a bunch of performing, and it's like, there's a lot more to tell. I actually do improvisational comedy. That's my big thing. Because I can't memorize stuff. So you'll have to go and read books and see if any of this was true. No, it's all true. People sometimes mention things, you know, I've heard that, and if I can't justify or verify it, I won't use it, because I wouldn't spread a fact that's not a known fact, because then somebody will go and spread that because I heard Ellicott say. I added a fact. I was telling Ryan about this book I just read this week. I've got 2 books I'll recommend to you. Somebody wrote 4 books on the history of Buffalo, and this one's called Out of the Wilderness. And this was the book that I found the fact that in 1816, Ellicott went back and remarked all his lines in the city because they'd gotten burned. War of 1812, and people were building houses in the wrong places. I consider my presentation to be an onion of layers. So I picked up that layer this week. It's called Out of the Wilderness. Stuart Desmond. It's one of 4 books. Second book I just started, and it starts with the War of 1812. Another book I'll share with you. This is called River Burning. It's a book about the War of 1812. The students in 4th grade in Newfane Elementary read this book, and I go out as Joseph Ellicott to talk to them. I don't do this talk. This is for the adults. I was a 4th grade teacher. I can break it down. So we have cards on the floor of Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, Albany, Buffalo, all of those things. And I interpret Joseph Ellicott's life through this book. In this book, there's a young girl in Lewiston whose mom never would come to the wilderness, and dad was there, and he went to fight the British. She had to make her way to where her aunt was the housekeeper for Joseph Ellicott in Batavia. She had to find her way to Batavia. Nora Perez is the author. Her dad wrote the first 20 Hardy Boy books. If any of me, I'm an old timer. I used to listen to Hockey Night in Canada. Brian McFarland used to be the Rick Janneret of Hockey Night in Canada. It's her brother. I went and met her. She was about 90 a couple years ago. I dressed like this when I went to meet her. So I have a nice picture. She's about this tall. But I show the kids that. I think that's important. Another author who used to come to our school said, if you want to write a good book for kids, get rid of the adults in the first chapter. Her dad went to fight the British. Now she can have an adventure. It's a good formula. Still works. Still works. One of the things I read to the kids, I love this book because you as an adult would like it, because she is so descriptive of what she says. So I read this to the kids, and this is sort of why I dress. Mr. Ellicott gazed at Dell, she's the young girl, intently. He was a tall, solid, impressive-looking man in his 50s, with a long nose, a determined mouth, a double chin, surrounded with a froth of white linen. Isn't that beautiful? It's a froth of white linen. And so for the kids, I think dressing and sharing that piece of the book, it's like she's relaying something to him. Ellicott was a big man. He was 6'3". People at that time were 5'8", 5'9". He was not a pleasant man. He was a very direct man. I don't think I would want to confront him if I was 5'8" and not a good speaker, because here comes this big, and he was a big man, with real directness, and I think a lot of people just backed away. Not worth it. They called his family the Big Family because many of them helped out in the Holland Land Office responsibilities. Boostai would not let Ellicott become a politician except for the treasurer of Erie or Genesee County, so he knew where the money was. But his nephews then went on to Albany and other places like that. So Ellicott had a difficult ending to his life. And that's kind of tragic for me. I get to go to the cemetery and stand at the graveside. I hope you get a chance to go there. It's beautiful. Wrought iron around a big obelisk. And when I'm there, I give a 7-minute, I guess that's what we're supposed to do, 7-minute talk. No more than 10. Somebody picks up their lantern, that's their signal. Stop talking. So they can go to another resident of the cemetery. And that's coming up in October, what dates?
17th and the 24th.
Yeah. It's worth going to because there are so many inhabitants who have stories. One of the things I have at home is my grandfather's 50 years of journals. Remember the quote I started out with, man dies twice? Man physically dies, and the last time somebody says his name. In reading those journals, my grandparents' friends come back to life. I was 10. They were 70. They've come back to life many, many, many years later. And so that quote really has a lot of meaning to me. And when I read these and share the information with my brothers, you know, we reminisce about those people who have come back to life. So your task when you leave tonight is tell the story of Joseph Ellicott. Now I've talked a whole bunch. Are there any more questions?
I have a comment and a question.
Sure.
This is the original
think of Genesee County. So
This is?
This is this building. My question is, how did they use that chain to cross waterways? How did they measure those distances when they crossed?
That's a really good question that my improvisational comedies will come up to play now. You see, you set a guy in a boat over here, right? And you hand him the chain and row it out until you stop. And then you hand another guy, I have no idea.
Big straw.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually had Ken Schlaugenhaupt, who's spoken before. He's probably, if you go to your website and look it up, he has a wonderful presentation on how they surveyed the actual surveying part. I took the chain, I met him in a park in Lewiston. I said, I carry this as a prop. Tell me how to use it. So he told me how that step effect would work. How did you go up and down the hills? Because it's a question. It's a good question. But it also makes sense. If it's stairs, all you're measuring is a part going across. You don't measure the up and down. So that made some sense. So that's, and I was on my third talk, and a friend of mine who was there said, Dennis, I've got a chain up in my attic. Would you like to use it? I can't tell you how many surveyors have said, how did you get a chain? Oh, I just was talking.
You answered my question. I was asking whether that's a reproduction or whether it's
That's a real old chain, yeah. Every 10 links, if I pulled it out far enough, there's a little marker hanging down. So they wouldn't have to count 1, 2, 3. They just look and say, this is the third one or fourth, whatever it is, in doing the links. But again, that to me is an incredible engineering feat.
Was Ellicottville someplace that he actually visited, or they just came up with the name?
The people in Ellicottville say yes. I did a talk there. Yeah. I don't know that information. Ryan, these are questions that I'll just say, hey, Ryan, what do you know? And sometimes he knows, and sometimes it's like, we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's very likely that he visited because he traveled all over the place. Now, did he travel there specifically for that purpose? Probably not.
He named it later.
But that was where the Cattaraugus County office was once it was established. So I'm sure he visited to check on the office at least once, but yeah, maybe not to the extent that people at Ellicottville say, but yeah, it's likely. So.
Now, you know what Ellicott wanted to name your town of Batavia? Bustayville. Right. I'm from Bustayville. Batavia sounds better, doesn't it? Yeah. Any other?
This is a question, kind of an obscure one. Washington, D.C. survey with Andrew. He laid it out in spokes.
Right.
The Freemasons claim they did the spokes and made a pentagon out of the city layout. Did you ever hear about that?
No, but I think a lot of history can be written after it happens and can be adapted to how it may have happened. Actually, Andrew wound up, he taught Lewis and Clark how to do their job before they went west. He wound up at West Point as a math instructor. So, now I had a question, maybe Sharon, you know, in the cemetery, Ellicott's buried, and his brother and sister, the twins, are there with him. Now, Benjamin never had family, but Rachel did. So I'm curious that, have you ever heard anything about why she chose to be there rather than some other place?
She wanted to be buried with her twin.
With her twin?
They're buried in the same grave.
Oh, are they in the same?
There's an article that they opened up his grave and she's with him.
Really?
She wanted to be reunited with him in death.
Wow. Because she's the one who brought Ellicott's body back from New York City and had him reinterred here. That's fascinating. It's like every talk I give, I get another piece of onion, another layer for that. So thank you for that information.
An old newspaper article to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a macabre story.
Yeah. I was telling Ryan that about 2 weeks ago I was at to say it's a brand new place is wrong. I was at a new historical spot of an old building from 1805. And I was there doing a talk, and they showed me a document that Joseph Ellicott had signed, giving them the permission to form an inn. 1801, the signature. 1805 is when they finally got to build it. This is up in Lockport. It's called the Forsyth Warren Tavern.
Okay.
It's on Route 104, right where 270 hits, which is Campbell Boulevard. I probably went by that building hundreds of times growing up in Wilson and working in Lockport. And then somebody discovered what it was, and they've been deconstructing it to bring in the old walls and bring this stuff back to what it would have been like. I told Ryan when I was there, yeah, he didn't do this for me. They did a period dinner. So they had chicken fricassee or root vegetables. That was your choice for dinner. So I had pizza 151 with sweet sauce. Love that.
Is that document on display there? They have it on the wall?
They had it on the table, when I came in. So I don't know where they keep their documents. But that's another interesting spot to get to if you get a chance. You know, one of the benefits of doing what I do is getting to go to historical societies all over. I've been from Albion to Jamestown and every place in between. I've been doing about 20 to 25 of these talks every year. And it's a real privilege to go see. Everybody has stuff that's old. If you haven't gone in the bathroom here, that is so... anybody can go, it's co-ed. But they've got the glass portraits with a rounded glass of all kinds of people. I think there's a Native American, there's a soldier, there are couples. It's just so cool. Usually you see one face or another. Just put your head in there, go ahead, it's worth it. So.
That's beautiful. The whole thing is all history.
Mhm.
In one room.
Yeah.
I stayed there too long.
Yeah. Go as a couple. You can enjoy it as a date. Something like that. So, yes, ma'am.
Are there historic markers where those stones?
You know, that's a good question. I was talking to a guy who he's not a surveyor, but he worked with surveyors. And they went looking for those stones, and whenever they find it, they put a brass marker down so that they can use it for surveying purposes. So they have gone out and found some of them.
Yeah.
The one up in Newfane or Alcott, they've brought back into the museum, which is good because it was starting to fracture, and they've lost some of the words that were up there, but it would be like latitude, longitude. The name Willink, because the next town here originally was Willink. Those were two of the Dutch houses. The Dutch houses were the Wall Street of the world. I can't mention that during the talk because Wall Street didn't exist in 1804 for my talk. So, but they were sending all the explorers, Henry Hudson and the Half Moon, many other places. They sent them out because they were looking for investing. So
I was wondering, state markers, the blue
Oh.
historic.
they put the big marker up, I know in Alcott,
Okay.
where the stone came out, and it says, end mark of the transit line for the Holland Land Office, whatever the wording is. But yeah, they tried to do that. Part of my goal is, and somebody said they've been there, is to get to Allegheny to see the other end stone. And that's in the, okay. Yeah, I called down there one day and I said, if I came down to see that, who could tell me something about it? And they said, nobody. I could tell you a story.
I
Yeah,
always ask that question, and if it comes,
okay,
if it comes to you, will help you.
yeah.
So at or around Letchworth Park, how did they survey the land and how did they structure the parcels to be sold?
Well, Letchworth actually was a little bit east, I think, wasn't it, Ryan?
Yeah.
That probably was part of the Phelps Quorum.
Well, that was also
There's some Morris.
mostly reservation land at that point.
Yeah,
So
or in the Morris Reserve.
doing the boundary of it, but not necessarily.
The Gardu tract.
But that would be really difficult. I mean, think of going across, you've got the cliffs, and I have no idea how they would do that.
Most of it was Mary Jemison's. They gave the Gardo Plateau.
Yeah, well, Mary Jemison, according to what I've read, was very creative at the end of the negotiation and pretty much said, I want the property from this tree to this tree. And they didn't realize it was like 20,000 acres or some huge number. But she got her own personal reservation in doing that. So anyhow, if you want to, yes, ma'am.
What happened to Ellicott's journals?
Good question. The journals. I think many of them are in Fredonia. Fredonia actually, I think Westfield was one of the sites for Holland Land Office Museum. A lot of that stuff went back to Holland. Some lady in my audience one time said, I've been to Holland, I helped them organize that. So she was going through the journals there. From what I was just reading, Fredonia bought a bunch of the journals and brought them back, so they have some of the stuff there.
The town or the college?
College. And I think the Buffalo History Museum has,
We have a large collection as well.
yeah.
Of correspondence, both personal and company related.
Yeah, there's been an awful lot of, there was an awful lot of writing that went on. I mean, that's how you document it. And it amazes me how much of that still exists, that people find that. Like, you know, watching Henry Louis Gates, Finding Your Roots, and they go back 500 years, and in the church, this was your 12th great grandfather's signature. It's like, really? It's mind-boggling. But anyhow, I thank you for a chance to share this with you. And this is a 200th year, and thank Ryan for having me come back out here today. I feel very privileged to share the story again. So, thank you. You can't escape without a hug. You can't escape without a hug.
So thank you again, Dennis. That was great. Joseph Ellicott coming back out. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We have a couple things coming up for the rest of the month. Next Tuesday, August 25th, back here at GoArt, we have another guest speaker, Lorna Zarnota, will be doing her one-woman show of a hoagie on the Erie Canal, the life of Eileen McGuire. She's a very good storyteller. That's what she does, so it should be a very interesting show. Then on Thursday, August 27th, we've got a twofer for you. In the morning, we're at the Richmond Memorial Library at 9:30 for Java with Joe. Claudia Newstein from the Genesee County Park and Forest will be talking about the watersheds of Genesee County. And then at night back here, Rich Conroy will be putting on a solo acoustic show. And coming up September 12th is one of our big events, our next Murder Mystery Dinner Theater. We're going to be at Eli Fish across the street for the Batavia Beer Bath murder. So you can go to our website, check out tickets for that. They are $50, which includes your meal and the show, right in Batavia's own brewery. So hopefully you'll check that out. Hopefully we'll see you at our upcoming events, and we'll see you the next time. Thank you, everybody.